I just wanted to introduce everybody to the panel now. Super panel we've got here, which is on the impact and influence of COVID-19 on the PropTech sector. We've got Michael Grant from Metrikus, Menno Lammers from PropTechNL, Francesca Brady from AirRated, and Caleb Dunn from Re-Leased. Let's just start with you, Caleb. Just give a very brief introduction of yourself and the company, just for those who may not know.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Richard. My name's Caleb from a company called Re-Leased, which is a software platform that allows property managers and landlords to better manage their commercial real estate. The particular division that I look after is named Credia, which looks specifically at market trends around sort of things like rent collection and lease lengths. So it will tie quite nicely with the type of stuff that Anthony's just been discussing, particularly around the office sector.
Perfect. Thanks very much. Francesca.
I'm Francesca. I'm a specialist in the atmospheric chemistry of indoor environments, which is just a fancy way of saying I know what I'm talking about when it comes to indoor air quality. Again, something that was mentioned in Anthony's slides. And also I'm CEO at AirRated. So AirRated is a global benchmark for indoor air quality. And our air score is the independent third-party verification for safe, healthy and productive spaces. Our ultimate aim is to create a healthier built environment, and then on that journey, raise awareness and education on the importance of indoor environmental quality for health, well-being, and also productivity.
Yeah, really interesting to see how that's come into focus over the crisis. Menno.
Yeah, hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Menno Lammers. I'm the founder of PropTechNL, but also the founder of PropTech for Good. So PropTechNL is the Dutch version of PropTech for Good. And PropTech for Good is an international cross-industry network, and the leaders are active in residential, commercial, retail, industry, and city, of course. And they are using technology to innovate and to contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals from the United Nations.
Michael, over to you.
Michael Grant, COO of Metrikus. We are a software as a service or platform as a service business in the PropTech built environment space. We bring data from sensors, all kinds of sensors, into a single pane of glass view, and give customers real-time data, near real-time data about what's going on in their office, whether that's around occupancy, capacity, indoor air quality monitoring, or energy monitoring. So giving them the data that had been, as Anthony mentioned in not the presentation he's just done, but just a couple of weeks ago, siloed data. We remove the silos and bring the data so everyone can see all the data in one place and make informed decisions.
And let's start with you, Michael. Just in terms of your reactions to the presentation from Anthony there, and picking up on some of his themes. I suppose, what are you seeing, and how do you see the reaction, particularly to the office?
Well, I think one of the areas that Anthony talked about was the Leaseman survey, and the different reasons people would or wouldn't like to go back to the office. And one of those is the way space is going to be used. We have a very large customer. We're doing projects for them in the UK and India, and they are going to change their space from being an office, as Anthony called it, to collaboration space. So they are going to be one of the companies that Anthony mentioned that will remove desks and create more collaborative spaces for people when they are in the office. They did a survey also, which was interesting. They did a survey about how many people would like to go back to the office, and 67% of those people said they really would like to go back to the office, but it wasn't full time. And again, back to something Anthony mentioned in his slides and presentation, part of that was about having the right office at home, like the right furniture, because I don't know, I kind of like stats. Physio visits have gone up like 70% since lockdown started, because people are sitting at dining room tables on beanbags, on sofas, or whatever it is. So our customers, if in an office perspective, are trying to work out the right balance of how they use the space and how much space that they do need. But there's a lot more. We're doing a lot more about occupancy and capacity monitoring at the moment for customers.
Okay, good. And Menno, I mean, one of the interesting things around the crisis has been also a larger focus on well-being, but also impact investment, and that idea of investment for good. I mean, you mentioned there PropTech for Good. So do you see the crisis in some way as being a catalyst for driving a number of these things forward? I suppose, how do you see the crisis in that sense?
Health and well-being, the SDG3, is of course a big issue right now because of the COVID. So that will change a lot. So when I talk about ESG, for example, then you see that the E was already there, and I think there is the consciousness of the whole climate challenge increased, and now we're very focused on the S. So that's one step forward, and I think we're going to accelerate that and those topics. The consciousness of E and S is growing and growing each day, I think. Recently did a webinar also with Asia. They are very focused on the E, but now they're also very consciousness on the S. So and we all know the numbers of 3, 30, and 300. So the 300 is hit now. So we definitely have to. So it's about air quality, but it's also about food. And there were already those trends going on, but I think the consciousness is grow. And I'm really looking forward to how everything will evolve will develop in that way, because it's not one single issue or one topic. It's more holistic in that way. And how can we build back better in that way? And also Anthony said it, it's different. And what we should do, we have to do now. I think it's horrible, of course, when people get sick or die, but I think it's good for the industry to sharpen the knife on a good way, and it will cut on more sides in that way. And of course there will be winners and losers, but it's time to reinvent and to innovate and reinvent your organization and your relationship with partnerships. So we also see, it's very critical, the whole value chain in that way. It's under pressure on different levels. So we can also shift to the stakeholder capitalism, which is mentioned also in the last 1.5 years, I think, more and more. So I think it's good, but it's also challenging for the next months and years.
And I think that's interesting, the challenges that have come up through this, and also that innovation often creates a route out of some of these challenges. Francesca, I'd be interested, certainly from my point of view, there'd been very limited information around air quality, certainly inside buildings. So I suppose looking at it from, pre-crisis to now, I suppose, what are you seeing as the key differences, both in terms of focus, but also, I guess, availability of information?
Really good question. I think pre-COVID, like indoor air quality monitoring, a lot of health and well-being initiatives were seen as fluffy and nice to have. And then there was a gradual shift change because, the Harvard study, COG-FX, came out, and that linked elevated levels of CO2 in the environment to decreases in cognitive performance, which impacts productivity. So then there was a shift change to, okay, we've got a competitive advantage then if we are monitoring our indoor air quality, bringing down those CO2 levels, and then increasing the productivity of our staff. Because like Menno said, you've got the 330-300 rule, where it's 3% is spent on rent and utilities, and then 30 again on more utilities, and then the 300 is the headcount. So it's the people, the payroll. So getting the most out of them impacts the bottom line. So I think there was a shift change towards using it for a competitive advantage. And now that COVID has hit, it's actually, we do need to be monitoring this ongoing and then creating healthy environments, and almost seeing it as, it's been taken with more seriousness now, because it was a nice to have and now it's a must have. and it's a must-have because it's impacting human health. So I don't know if you're familiar with Professor Joseph Allen. He's been in the news a lot recently. He's a professor at Harvard, but he talks about a multi-layered approach to building up the defense against things like the current pandemic, but also future-proofing our environments and making them more resilient to things like this. And one of those layers of defense is healthy buildings. So how our buildings can actually protect us from this sort of stuff. And they should be our safe havens. But like you said, it's monitoring these things and understanding what the current state of play is, and then moving past that and trying to improve things. And I think the development of new technology and the accessibility to it, because the price point is starting to come down somewhat, and employing that in the built environment is critical. But then also being able to make something meaningful out of that data, because a lot of the time people will collect the data, whether it's through the BMS or through these disparate IoT devices that are placed around the building. But it's then getting that data and being able to interpret it and then making decisions based on that data, and making bespoke decisions, because a lot of the time it's not a one size fits all as much as we would all love it to be. It's going to be bespoke to each individual building, each geographical location. So yeah, it's just getting that data, but making it meaningful.
Caleb, just coming to you, I mean, Francesca's there talked about the growing importance of data. Have you seen, in terms of the influence of the health crisis, how has that driven forward, I suppose, to your business, and also some of the innovation around the data side?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think probably the critical thing has been people's appetite for it. I remember doing a bit of product testing probably a year ago, talking about, opening up a bit of transparency. Let's see what the market is doing. Would you be interested in contributing data or sharing data in return for, market insights, etc. And the general consensus was, no, we're pretty happy with how things are working at the moment. I've got my mates down the street, and I can always give them a ring, see what their view is, what their finger on the pulse is for the market trends. And I think, COVID fundamentally changes what that relationship looks like. You can't go and have a pint with your colleague or with your mate at another office down the road. So understanding what is happening in the market from an objective and an evidence-based approach has been a market shift in what we've seen. And also the way in which it's just informing people's decisions now. So I think Anthony touched on sort of what the office is going to look like in the future, and probably twisting or pivoting slightly to more of like an investor type of perspective. A lot of noise has been around sort of, how are we going to make the most of our mixed class assets? How are we going to turn our office spaces into, can we put some residential pieces on? Can we blend those asset classes together? Our data is sort of uncovering that the returns on office investment, the rents that those are collecting are actually on par with industrial, which has been prized as the sort of the property type that's done the best out of COVID, with the e-commerce links and all that kind of stuff. So it is interesting to see what the data shows, as opposed to, I guess, subjective review and people's perspective.
And Michael, I just wanted to pick up with you, because obviously you're getting quite a lot of global data in as well. What are you seeing in terms of changing demand patterns, let's say for landlords and occupiers? Are you getting information around that and how you see that might be changing?
Yeah, so the first lockdown, office occupancy, and we supply an occupancy index to Bloomberg. There's a ticker that you can look up for occupancy index across the UK, and it's data from our platform. And it's interesting, the first lockdown, occupancy levels went from 60, 70, 80% down to pretty much, down below 5%, because some people still did have to go in for their jobs. Then we came out of lockdown and it went back up to about 45%, pretty much overnight. But this lockdown, it's only dropped back down to about 30%. So it hasn't gone down as far as the last one. So there are people that have needed to stay in the office, people that have wanted to stay in the office, but there is there is a shift. There obviously was a huge shift for the first lockdown, but the second lockdown has not been as dramatic. And more people are actually coming back. So, this month, we obviously track it daily, but this month has seen a steady climb of people going back in. And I think this is obviously for the UK, different parts of the UK in different lockdown, but London especially, I think come the second, you'll see it jump back up. We're heading to Christmas. Everyone wants to go out and have a drink together and spend some time together again. But the drop has not been anywhere near as dramatic as it was for the first lockdown. And this is the data that we give out to people and is now available globally so that people can start to see trends. Landlords are asking us, as well as our owner-occupier customers, what are we seeing from an occupancy capacity point of view? Because they are obviously worried that when people do come back fully, they won't need 100% of the space that they've had now. They might be able to get rid of 20% of that, but some of our customers aren't talking about getting rid of space at all. They're just talking about what Anthony said earlier, is they're talking about changing the way they use their office space. So a customer I mentioned before, collaboration spaces is what they're going to build. So remove desks and have collaboration spaces. Not everyone will do that, but some of the more proactive companies will, because they don't want to lose talent.
Yeah, I think that's interesting just to see how those changes have come about over that time, Michael. Francesca, I wanted to pick up with you. There've been long discussions around sustainability and those kinds of aspects, and also it's only really been relatively recently that the indications are there that actually those people who do have LEED, BREEAM, those kinds of things, is that actually the value of those assets increases because of that, or the reverse is true, that those assets that don't are not as attractive. Do you see that also happening with air quality? Is that one of the things that you think people will begin to look at much more in terms of valuing assets?
Definitely. I think with a lot of these things, it probably starts as added value. So reducing void periods, making spaces more attractive as a USP, and then it starts to translate into added value. Because we're always questioned about it. It's like, what is the value premium of having good air quality? We're like, rather than putting a number on it, because there's definitely not enough data out there to suggest that you could put a number on it. We tend to go down the route of it accelerates leasing campaigns. So, for example, with AirRated, nice little plug, we have air scores. So one of our clients got an air score, one of the first, so early adopters of the air score. Their building had just PC'd. They had prospective tenants coming around the space actively asking about indoor air quality, because I think it's on everyone's minds. They sort of relate.
Francesca, sorry, what does PC'd mean, just for those?
Practical completion. So
okay, fine, good. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, please let me know if I'm getting too technical. So once a building's just been completed, then you need to fill it with people. So lots of prospective tenants coming around, and on their agendas there is the obvious size, rent, location, but then on people's list is also air quality at the moment. So it's a really big thing. People are becoming more conscious about it, because it's not just what am I breathing outside, but also what am I breathing indoors, where I spend 90% of my time living, working, probably more so now that we're in lockdown. But yeah, they were able to then show that prospective tenant their air score and say, this is our commitment to providing you with a safe, healthy, productive environment. And subsequently the deal transacted, not saying that we were the reason for that, or promoting indoor air quality, good indoor air quality was the reason for that, but it was one of many reasons. So I think it's definitely becoming more important to accelerating leasing campaigns, being a USP. I think being the known is really important, particularly at the moment, because the unknown is not a nice place to be, and so much is unknown with COVID, that I think as a developer or a landlord or an employer, if you're able to tell the people in your building occupants, that they're in a safe and healthy space, that is quite important. So as a prospective tenant, if you're looking at two buildings that have the same amenities, same rent, same access to public transport. And the one differentiating factor is one of them is telling you what their air quality is like and one of them isn't. I think particularly now people will go with what they know.
I have a question. How can we increase the air quality? Because real estate is very focused on material, but material is also has also a footprint, and also the installation is bad, so let's do a new installation. But we all have plans at the back, without Richard, but it's around him, we don't see it, but what can we do to increase those the air quality?
Yeah, I think that is a very good question. And it's one that a lot of people have, because they say, as soon as I start monitoring, what if it's not great? And what if I need to make improvements? And oh my God, how much is it going to cost me? That is the main question. A lot of the time, behavioral changes are really important and can dramatically improve what's happening indoors. So we had a case where we were monitoring an existing building that was in use. So the change we suggested was, we saw a timestamp almost every day, Monday and evening, of elevated levels of TVOCs, which are chemicals basically. And they were from the cleaning products. So we said to them, that's compromising your indoor air quality. If you switch to eco products, they clean just as well. They're great for the environment. So that's a nice kind of sustainability environmental play, like you were saying, it's the E. But also it's not compromising indoor air quality. So it was a really quick win for them, as well as just best practice use of space. So if you're in a commercial environment, leaving your meeting room door open after a meeting, where CO2 levels can come back down to equilibrium and aren't elevated, aren't impacting your productivity. There are so many light touch things you can do. Mm-hmm. And there are lots of products. So there's a product called AirRated. It's a paint. You put it on the wall and it essentially acts as a chemical barrier. So pollutants interact with the chemical barrier and break down into less harmful byproducts. And it's a paint with the cost of it is basically like the same as using Dulux paint. So it's exactly the same price point, but it is breaking down VOCs and has been seen to have antibacterial and antiviral products as well. So it's one of those things where if you're in tune with all these innovative products that are coming out and you enforce best practice use of space, I think that can dramatically improve the indoor environment without having to go to the plant. Yeah.
Do I have to start a plant business because NASA also did a research for 9 plants, which has the best oxygen and that kind of things. Maybe it's a good time to do indoor plants business or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think with that NASA study, the Peace Lily, I think, came out as number 1. So loads of people are like, fine, I'll just flood my spaces like I've done with plants. Plants is a bit of a contentious topic because they're great at regulating humidity. So they are good for the environment and they will slightly lower TVOCs and CO2, but they don't have a significant impact, not like enhanced ventilation, which would do. So they're great. And I think from the biophilia side of things, they have a great impact on how people feel and mental health, as well as slightly improving indoor air quality.
Because that's also interesting. Concrete doesn't make you move and green makes you move. And that's also for mental health, for physical health, everything is in that way. It's great. Yeah. It's not tech, but it's nature tech.
Exactly, yeah.
I'm beginning to feel very bad about not having a peace lily now. So I've made a mental note to adjust that for the next session. Really interesting there, I think. And Caleb, obviously, I mean, what Francesca's saying there really is that in some ways you can only make these changes if you've got the data and you're monitoring it. So you mentioned before about a slight change in terms of people's perspective around data and data collection. How do you see that moving forward? Do you see that as one of the kind of key challenges to making these improvements?
Yeah, I mean, Francesca talked about, I guess, the essential fear of ripping off the lid and seeing what the data says about your business and what it says about your properties. And I'd like to think that COVID has broken down a couple of those barriers as well. People are more understanding, just as a result of what's happened in the last 9 months, that data is going to play a large part in the way forward. I think everyone turns on BBC or goes to wherever the news site is and looks at the number of cases now every single day. I mean, it's just that kind of introduction of using data to make decisions and moving or I guess meshing subjective elements as well. So in terms of looking at how your rent collection performance might be, or what your average lease lengths, looking at things that sort of underpin the value of your business. You might do that before COVID, sort of, every quarter, every year, when your lender might ask you for that information if you're a property investor. But we are seeing a shift just as a result of the natural progression of the environment and the way that people are integrating at the moment.
Okay, good. Bart, thanks very much for your question. Got a question in from Bart Sassim, who's CEO and founder of Spatial Experience. And this is actually addressed to you, Francesca, but I'm going to address it to everybody because I think there'll be some interesting points from this. Apart from biophilia and paint that Francesca has mentioned, what are other spatial design methods to improve air quality? So interesting to get your perspective on that, and maybe also yours, Michael.
Yeah, so I would say actually Menno touched on this earlier, but the materials that you're bringing into the space are crucial. So low VOC materials, anything, if you can get it as natural as you can, that's going to improve indoor air quality. In terms of the design of spaces, just a lot of the time we see that there's been a disconnect between the people planning the design of the space, so where they're going to put up partitions, and the building infrastructure. So sometimes it'll almost partition off a meeting room from any form of ventilation, which that it isn't right to have that sort of disconnect, particularly now that we're seeing that poorly ventilated areas actually promote the transmission and contraction of something like COVID. So I think, improving the disconnect between spatial design planning and looking at the building infrastructure. So M&E designers working with the people who are putting up these partitions and interior designers, and in theory they should be working together anyway, but I guess if you're doing a refurb it's slightly more different, and you need to know, and this is another thing that smart buildings platforms can help with, is actually just having a visual asset registry, so you know what's above the ceiling, and you know where these things are located when you're doing that planning.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, and we're going to pick up some of those things around digital twins in the next session as well, looking at efficiency and actually how we can drive some of these things forward. Michael, anything from your side in terms of, I guess, that design sense?
Yeah, we see one of the good things and the bad things, depending on who you are, when we digitize a building. And if we take indoor air quality and keep the theme going, when we put sensors in that measure multiple parameters, one of the big areas we're seeing, and we do see, obviously CO2 is a big one, and then humidity is the other. Now, at the moment, one of our large US investment bank customers, they're pushing a lot more fresh air through their systems than they ever would. And generally what happens, and this is probably where the design change needs to happen, is they design in, and this is the M&E or MEP consultants, based on what the customer says their budget is, to meet the minimum standard requirements of the industry for fresh air coming into a building. Now it's 10 litres a minute or something, I think, Francesca, isn't it? And that per person. And if you up that a little bit, yes, it's going to up an energy increase a little bit, but not substantially. You would see a huge change in the air quality in a building. So, from day one, don't just try and meet the minimum requirements, because over time it does get worse. We see CO2 levels that are really high where they shouldn't be, but that's because they're not pushing as much fresh air in from the outside. Now, when it's really cold, you don't want to do that because it's cold air, but also that does dry out the space as well. So humidity levels come down. So a couple of things, don't just meet the minimum requirements, go a little bit further, and then it'll have a much better impact on the people and the space and then the equipment, because the equipment's not working as hard as well.
Yeah, I'd say Michael's completely right in that the kind of equipment you've got, because we saw I think definitely like monitoring what you've got inside, looking at the equipment and looking at what you've got outside is particularly important, because we've seen a lot of events recently where outdoor air pollution has spiked. So for Bonfire Night and Diwali, where there have been lots of fireworks, and there have been filter changes that have come into play. So pristine new filters that are then clogged up by dust and all the crap that's thrown out by fireworks. And then those pristine filters are pretty much redundant after that. So if you have all this data, and like we've said, we need to have the data to be able to action these changes, but having that and delaying a filter replacement can actually be hugely beneficial from an energy point of view and a health and well-being point of view.
Okay, good. There's a quick follow-up question to this as well, which is, which I think is an interesting one, which is, how can front runners in this, in terms of, I suppose, the design and take-up of this, actually put this out more, amplify this for residents, for tenants? How do we get that message out and bring everybody on board? That's for anybody to pick up, really.
I think, Francesca, it's probably a good one for your customer in Belgium, because they went a little bit further, put carbon filters in based on the recommendation from you guys at AirRated. And then they promoted that, didn't they? That's how they got their tenant in, I think.
Yeah, with I think in order to kind of translate this to an end user, we need something that is simple and effective at communicating the health of indoor environments. So that's what we use the air score for, is a way to, at a really high level, just tell you about the health of the indoor environment.
Just one of those areas that I think, certainly brought the sustainability side much more was the fact that there was more kind of data certainty, there were global standards, there were these kinds of things. How important is this sort of standardization of data, both for investors, but also for tenants, for occupiers, in terms of being able to understand and then take up and act on what's happening?
From a data perspective, we ingest a lot of data. I think the old days, again, referring back to Anthony's part of Anthony's presentation, but the old ways need to finish and the new ways need to come in very quickly now, because data is the new oil, as people say, and having data from multiple sources helps you make informed decisions. But the old BMS systems that were BACnet and Oddbus or IPC, all that data was locked away, and the only people that ever really got to look at that were the engineers and the FM team. They never really wanted other people to possibly see it. But all of that data needs to be open. You need to be able to plug the data in. We have an open API, so some of our customers use our platform, and some of our customers use the platform from a front end to show indoor air quality, but then they take all of the data. GSK is a customer of ours. They use the indoor air quality data to show their team the quality of the air in their buildings, but then they take all of the data off the back end and they give it to scientists and they do stuff with it so they can understand, pull out all the data. Open data sources, open connectivity into a platform, that's the way things need to go. Mobile phones, many years ago when I first came to the UK, you could only text message the same network. Then they all realized if they opened it up and let everyone text everyone, they'd all make more money. It's the same thing with data. You need the more data you have, the more informed decisions that you can make. So data needs to be unlocked in buildings, and that's what we do day in and day out. But it is important for people to help make informed decisions. The Met Office is a customer of ours, and putting in the indoor air quality sensors we did help them understand that their planned preventative maintenance on their filters wasn't being carried out the way it should, because it was as dusty inside as it was outside. But unless we put sensors in, they wouldn't have seen that data. It was locked away in the BMS.
And I think that's interesting. And mate Tatrinov, thanks for your comment there. Also saying it'd be awesome if end users have the transparent real-time access to insight. And I think that's going to be one of the key things, and we'll pick that up certainly in the presentation and the panel that follows this one. Just in the sort of last 4 minutes we've got left, I just wanted to pick up from everybody what you see as the biggest trends in terms of PropTech or innovation that you think has come from the health crisis? And also, what do you think will be the most long-lasting influence? Because I'm painfully aware that humans have a big ability to be able to forget things quite rapidly. Let's start with you, Caleb. What do you think is the kind of biggest trend that will have come from this and the most long-lasting?
Sure. I mean, from my own perspective, the key trend that I've seen is an increased appetite for wanting to benchmark and wanting to see what the market data is doing, and comparing your own portfolio, your own buildings, if you're looking at air quality and running those comparisons. I think prior to the pandemic, people were pretty happy to just look at their own portfolio, compare their own buildings to each other, and measure that performance on that particular yardstick. Now there's an increased appetite for wanting to compare like for like, whether that be in different countries. And that sort of goes back to your previous point on how do we make sure that data is standardized across different regions as well as different platforms as well. So going back to Michael's point, making sure that data is transparent and open so that the market comparisons can be done is going to be sort of key for PropTech going forward.
Great, thanks very much. Menno.
One is, I think the mindset of working from home is okay. That's one trend. The other one, I think is really something holistic. You know, everything is connected. So the health, the environment, and technology can lever to those big issues. So the whole consciousness of health and climate is really going up and is there to stay.
Okay, good. Thank you. Francesca.
Yeah, so I think like Caleb came up with a really good point about that standardization in terms of data collection. So then off the back of that, you can do things like AI, and machines actually have standardized data points that they can look at, but also being able to compare like for like is a massive thing. But I think Menno's point about everything being connected is probably what we've all started to glean from this COVID situation, and just looking at the bigger picture. So particularly like in terms of sustainability and how it works hand in hand with health and well-being, we've been monitoring spaces along with the guidance that's been set by CIBSE in terms of switching off recirculation of air. So people moving from sort of 77 to 80% fresh air, outdoor air, up to 100% because they've been told to switch off recirculation. And we've seen a massive improvement in indoor air quality. And I think from the sustainability point of view, that could be seen as compromising sustainability initiatives. But if we have data about occupancy from like the Metrikus platform or wherever that might be, if we can overlay that with indoor air quality data and create demand controlled ventilation, then there's a massive play in both the sustainability, making places more sustainable, but also making them healthier environments. So I think definitely looking at the bigger picture and realizing that everything is interconnected, whether it's outdoor air quality and the indoor air quality relationship, whether it is ventilation with sustainability and health and well-being, everything is connected. And we just need to bear in mind when we're making changes, we need to bear in mind the consequence. It was like way back when we switched from petrol cars to diesel cars, it was because petrol increases the prevalence of greenhouse gases, which impacts climate change. But then diesel actually now really poorly impacts our health. And it's like, oh, maybe we made the wrong decision and actually we need to move to electric. But it's because there wasn't really that forward-thinking vision. We weren't looking at the bigger picture when we were making these decisions. And now we need to just sit back, not make knee-jerk reactions all the time, and actually look at how this is going to impact more than just one thing.
Great, thanks. And last 10 seconds for you, Michael.
I think one thing that is changing, we're seeing very, very quickly from customers, is measuring occupancy capacity and indoor air quality. Because when you combine those two data sets, the output of that, you can make informed decisions and make real changes in your building that affect the people that are in them. So I agree with you, Richard. People tend to forget very quickly when they want to, but I think with COVID, I mean, literally everyone in the world, I think, knows a little bit more about indoor air quality than they did before. And I don't think people will let that go away now, whether it's employees or employers. They need to keep it front and center. So I think monitoring more and more in the buildings will change, and especially indoor air quality, that's not going away anytime soon.
Great. Thanks very much, everybody. Really interesting discussion. Thank you all for your comments as well. The next session is a presentation on return to work, what landlords can do to attract occupiers back, from Lucas Balick, co-founder and CEO at Spaceflow. And then there'll be the follow-up kind of panel on that, just digging down into some of the topics around how we can make that more efficient and also drive returns. Enjoy the next presentation and see you shortly for the next panel. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Richard.
Thank you.